Urban Meyer, coming out of left field, has some stuff to say about the Georgia Bulldogs football schedule this year. He basically criticized the program, criticized Kirby, kind of for the criticized is kind of a stretch. Sounds like he's joking around a little bit on a podcast, but it gives me an opportunity to talk about Georgia's schedule and to compare it to the rest of, the top of the Big Ten, all those teams' schedules, because I went and looked, and I don't think it's as tough as the Big Ten schedule. I know the other SEC schedules are really tough. I don't think Florida has it easy. Texas has got some tough games, Alabama obviously, but I'll go ahead and read you what Urban Meyer had to say. He said, I'm sitting here looking at Georgia's schedule, and they're playing 9. He thinks they're playing 9 home games. This is an SEC schedule, man. 9 games at home, which is not true, by the way. He said, Marshall, Austin Peay, Charlotte. Come on, Kirby, what in the world is that? So that's the Bear Bryant model right there. Just kind of joking towards Kirby. I don't know how much of a joke it really is, but I do think that, one, he doesn't realize Georgia has 7 home games, 2 neutral sites, 3 roads, right? So, yeah, the majority is at home. Not a vast majority, but the majority is at home. One of those neutral sites being in Atlanta against Georgia Tech, the other neutral site being against the Florida Gators in Jacksonville. But Georgia was punished is a bad way to put it, but that's the way I'm going to put it. Georgia was punished in the first year of the expanded to 16 teams SEC. In the first year of Texas and Oklahoma being in the conference, the Dogs got arguably the worst schedule, the most difficult one. There are some other programs that had some tough ones, but when you think about Georgia having to go on the road and playing 3 top 15 programs, Ole Miss, Alabama, Texas, Texas being ranked number 1 at the time, Alabama being a top 5 matchup, these night games, in addition to a neutral site against Clemson and other tough games, right? Georgia got punished. When you flip the SEC schedule around, they get rewarded a little bit, right? And so other teams that had it a little bit easier last year, having it a little bit more difficult this year, and vice versa. But for someone, and I don't know what perspective he comes from in college football. Who does he associate the most with now at this point? Is it Ohio State? Is he a Big Ten guy? I know he's worked more on those networks too since he's retired as a coach. Obviously, he has old ties to the SEC. I think he's coming at this from a Big Ten perspective. And what I want to sit here and look at with y'all and discuss, I don't know that I'll be able to bring it up on the screen, but I'll be as detailed as possible when talking about these schedules. I brought up the 4 powers, 4 teams that are considered the top teams in the Big Ten, and looked at their schedules. And even with Georgia having majority home schedule, and not having a big-time neutral site game, I think you can objectively look and say, man, Georgia's road is more difficult to get to their conference championship, to get to the postseason. Ryan Curley from Dawg Post. We're having all sorts of deals right now in terms of subscriptions, in terms of the newsletter, in terms of magazines. So I implore you to go to dawgpost.com, DAWG post.com. It's easy. Make sure you're checking all of that out. So to run through Georgia's schedule real quick, Marshall, Austin Peay at home, at Tennessee, home against Bama, home against Kentucky, at Auburn, home against Ole Miss, neutral site against Florida, at Mississippi State, home against Texas, home against Charlotte, neutral site against Georgia Tech. When you look at like ESPN's latest power rankings, which I'm going to talk about in more detail, Georgia plays what Texas is 1 on this list. Alabama's number 4 on this list, so that's 2 top 5 teams. Tennessee's number 10 on this list, so that's 3 top 10 teams. Ole Miss is number 13, Auburn's number 14, and Florida's number 19. So they're playing 6 of the top 20 teams on this list, 3 of them being in the top 10. So right there, it shows you in terms of these are like power. I'm going to get into this in more detail, but this is the most recent ranking that ESPN's come up with. They're calling it their FPI National Championship odds. I'll talk about that probably tomorrow. But that's 6 of the top 20 teams. Let's look at Michigan. Let's look at the Wolverines. Out of conference, they do have at Oklahoma. They play a couple cupcake games. They've got, it looks like, one more conference game. But in terms of top, I mean, they've got to go to USC. It's not easy to travel across the country. They play Ohio State at home, a team they've beaten over and over, but obviously is one of the best teams in the country. There's no other challenge. At Nebraska might be interesting if Raiola and Matt Rule and that program take a step forward, but Washington at home, Michigan State on the road, Purdue at Northwestern, at Maryland, these are games that Michigan should win. At Oklahoma could be a challenge for sure against Ohio State, and at USC. I only see 3 kind of tough games. I mean, I look at this Michigan team as a 9-3 or 10-2 team. You know, I look at Georgia as a potential 12-0 team, 11-1 team, but they've got all of these top teams to play. So when you look at Michigan's schedule, it's not more difficult than Georgia's. Let's go to Oregon versus Montana State versus Oklahoma State. Should take care of business there. At Northwestern, should take care of business versus Oregon State, should take care of business. At Penn State, obviously that's tough for a multitude of reasons. Versus Indiana, good program, should get that done. At Rutgers, should get that done. Versus Wisconsin, should get that done. At Iowa, interesting. Minnesota at home, USC at home. At Washington, that's not as tough as Michigan's schedule. Okay? So I look at Penn State. Nevada, Florida International, Villanova. Those are 3 easy dubs for the Nittany Lions. They host Oregon. Obviously, it's a big-time matchup. At UCLA versus Northwestern. At Iowa, at Ohio State. So at Ohio State versus Oregon for the Nittany Lions. The rest of it should be easy sledding when you talk about Nebraska at home, Rutgers on the road, Michigan State, Indiana. I look at Oregon's schedule and I think, man, is that easier than both of the other ones that or Penn State? Is that easier than Oregon's? Is that easier than Michigan's? It's definitely not Georgia's or some of these other SEC schools. And look, I don't try to do SEC bias all the time. I don't try to just kind of pound the table on I think that the SEC is better. I do think it's better in a lot of ways. The depth of the schedule is usually more difficult because there are more high-quality teams that would produce in the Big Ten. Then you go to the Ohio State Buckeyes, the crown jewel of the Big Ten right now, right? The national champions, the program that Urban Meyer is most recently associated with. I just remembered his Jacksonville Jaguars stint, but obviously I think he cares about college football more. They host Texas, big-time game, difficult stuff. They host Penn State, and they go to Michigan. Everything else in between should be easy games. Rutgers, UCLA, Purdue, Wisconsin, Illinois, Minnesota, Washington, Ohio, Grambling. These are games that 100% Ohio State should be winning. Now, I think that you could say Georgia should win arguably all these games, but in terms of the difficulty of the path, why are we crapping on the Dogs when they've got to deal with Tennessee on the road? They've got to deal with Auburn on the road. Those are 2 of the biggest college football environments in terms of just the difficulty. Ole Miss, Florida, neutral site. Georgia Tech gave Georgia problems last year, neutral site. It's because of the 3 cupcake games and that the other programs only have 2 or they also have 2 or 3. But Georgia didn't create the schedule, and they certainly appreciate that most like Tennessee or that Alabama and Texas are at home this time around. But they didn't do that last year, and that's not a Georgia thing. That's a conference-wide thing in terms of the scheduling. Georgia, out of all of the programs at the top of the list of teams that you think might win, probably the top 8 or 9 teams, right? That includes teams like Notre Dame, the 4 Big Ten programs that I just looked at in terms of their schedule, all of that. Georgia's got the most difficult path to make it to their conference championship on a week-in, week-out basis. When you think about just the back-to-backs of some of these games, it's going to be really difficult. Very, very difficult. Florida and then road trip to Mississippi State and then Texas all in November. That's a 3-week stretch that's difficult. A 3-week stretch where they got to buy in between going to Tennessee and hosting Alabama. There's just those stretches don't exist for these Big Ten programs. The SEC has a deeper and more difficult schedule, even if there's only 8 conference games. I just don't know why we're crapping on Kirby and the Dogs when it comes to this. I will also crap on them when the time comes, but the time is not the SEC schedule that has to play. It's very difficult. Appreciate you watching.